Hey guys, what's happening? Thanks for tuning in, coming back and watching. I appreciate it. Hope you're doing really well. Staying safe, taking care of yourself. And for those of you that are new here, I'm Jim. It's great to meet you. I make tutorial videos here every week showing you how I take my photos using different software products and edit them to get the results that I want. Today I'm in Luminar 4 and I've got a photo that I've edited. I'm going to walk through my workflow and show you what I did, but primarily what I want to talk about is kind of, well, it's failure, to be honest. I feel like I get a lot of comments and emails from people that say, gosh, you do these things with Luminar, you seem like you know what you're doing and that sort of thing. And, I do know Luminar well. I use it all the time. And I generally know what I'm doing. And I also generally open a photo and can look at it and kind of say, okay, I kind of want to do this. I kind of want to do that. Or I have an idea of what I want to do. And then I'll go in and make the edits. And I generally know how to get there as well. But this photo is not one of those. This photo has kind of haunted me, for lack of a better word, for a long time. I took it in Iceland. Here's the photo. I was back in Iceland with Skyloom on the Luminar photo camp in February. And this is Vesterhorn, and it's super beautiful, and it's super dramatic, and it was super awesome to be there. But I have to be honest, I've edited this photo so many times, and I can never, ever, ever feel like I get it, the way I want it to be. And I don't know how I want it to be. That's part of the problem. And so I feel like I've failed time and time again, but you've heard the concept of failing forward, and that's kind of what I'm talking about here. I've failed, but I feel like I've learned something or, eliminated something that I don't want to do. I've done several monochrome versions of this. I've done it with an overlay of snow to make it look like the snow is coming down. It actually did snow a tiny bit, I think, as we were leaving, but I continued to just be disappointed with my edits, to be honest. So here's the edit that I have now. That's my final edit today. And I say today, of course, because I may go in there and change it again tomorrow. Part of the beauty of digital photography. My point really with this video is don't be afraid to experiment, try new things, try to figure it out, and just hack your way around. And don't be afraid of failing and walking away kind of pissed off that something didn't work out, because I've done that plenty. And I'll continue to do it because it's part of the learning process and it's part of failing forward. Taking what you've learned and turning that into something that you can use to kind of springboard forward in the future. So I'm going to hit reset on these tools that I've used here and walk you through my workflow for this shot. Okay, here we go. I'm on the base layer. I did do a 16:9 crop. I took out a bit of the sky. It was obviously rather blah. I took out a little bit of the foreground, but I wanted to leave over here in this left corner a little bit of that texture there, and of course I wanted to leave all these little humps of grass and that sort of thing. So that was my crop. And then went into the light tool, and I did not adjust the temperature and tint. I just adjusted smart contrast, highlights, and shadows. I didn't do anything else down below. Next up was AI Enhance, and I used AI Accent and gave that a little boost. And then oddly, I went down here to Landscape Enhancer, and I clicked on Golden Hour, and that was really trying to bring up those warmer tones, because that was one of the confusing parts. I was like, it's a really cool photo in terms of temperature, except you get these nice little pops of orange, which I think is a wonderful contrast in the photo. So I was working through trying to do that, and I think Golden Hour gave me a nice little pop there. So one more time, there's before, and there's after, just a little bit brighter and a little bit more colorful in those little clumps of grass. Next up was a new image layer. You can see I got quite a few layers here, or excuse me, not a new image layer, a new adjustment layer. So got that, and the first thing I did was go into the light tool, which is, I can't turn off, reduce the exposure a little bit, bumped up contrast, and I should point out this is focused on the foreground here. So let me show you the mask. I'll just click on that and show you, and this is the area that I'm focused on, okay? So this is the foreground. There's a lot more foreground, but this is a smooth part of the foreground, for lack of a better word. And so I painted that in first. And so if I use a new adjustment layer and I know that I'm going to be doing everything on that layer for a specific part, then I'll use a layer mask. It's much quicker than, of course, using a filter or tool mask each time. But anyway, I did that, popped into light, and then I came down to AI structure and just dragged that to the left. All I'm doing is softening that area. And I did the same thing with details enhancer. Just took some of those to the left, and basically I'm just creating a little bit of blur in that area that I painted in the foreground, because it was kind of windy, it's kind of wintry, and I wanted it to be smoother, as though the wind had blown a lot of that texture out of the frame and it just kind of smoothed it out. that was kind of the look that I was going for. And so I used negative details and negative structure with a mask to paint it in there. And now that I had finished that, the next thing I did was go add a layer for details. And this was also an adjustment layer, and this was to focus on the details in the foreground. So once again, I'll click on the brush. You can see where I painted this in, basically the mountain ranges and some of the clumps of grass there. So again, this was a layer focused just on those areas, so I painted that in first, and then I went over here to Details Enhancer and AI Structure to bring them up. So AI Structure got a 46. Again, it's going selectively in those areas. And Details Enhancer got a nice little bump there, as well as some sharpening. And again, I'm trying to bring out the detail in those clumps of grass and the mountains. And in the previous layer, I had smoothed out the foreground. So I'm kind of creating a bit of a contrast between the smooth and kind of the crispy, for lack of a better word. Okay, so that was my workflow. And at this point, I was like, you know, I really like it. Maybe it should be a black and white. And this is when I started experimenting with black and white. I won't do that here because this layer is just for those areas. But what I did is I went in and created an adjustment layer. And this is the one where I kind of got stuck for quite a while, to be really honest. So I've got that on. You can see I've got the light tool, and I did a minor temperature bump here. A little bit of smart contrast. Pull down the shadows. Pull down the highlights. But I bumped up the whites a little bit. And so if I turn this layer off, let me show you again. There's before this layer, a bit bluer, as you can see, and I'm not nervous, but I was definitely aware of how blue this scene is, and I'm trying to pull that back a little bit for my final photo because I don't want to overdo the blue. So that's one of the reasons I created a little bit of warmth here. And then after I did that, this is where I experimented with black and white, and I'll just do that for fun here. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously. I don't think I showed you the final result. Maybe I did. I already forgot. There's a monochrome, and while I liked it, I wasn't really in love with it. And like I said, I did probably 3 or 4 versions before I finally eliminated that idea from kind of what I was going to do with the photo. So next I went into color. Here I took down the saturation a bit, which is kind of hard for me because I like saturation so much. And also in blue, I brought that down. Again, I'm trying to maintain a kind of a cool overall temperature, but I don't want it to be too blue. So I'm bringing down the saturation of the overall colors, and then also the saturation of the blues here. Now what I did, as you can see, is this was painted in, so the mask that I applied with my brush was there. I should have clarified that. So the blues I brought down, but that's because they were getting way too blue in the mountaintops. So I pulled those down and made them look more like mountaintops, and otherwise they were kind of getting blue. Let me show you the before. There it is, a little too blue there, and after, I think that looks better. Okay, next was hopping over here to the Creative tab, and I added a little bit of mystical, just a global application of that, and then went to the Portrait tab and did the same thing with Orton, just a little bit of that, kind of applying that globally across the photo. Okay, then 2 more things I did on this layer. I went over to Adjustable Gradient, and I set the orientation, as you can see, right there, basically in the on the horizon, right, where the mountains rise up from the sea. It's a very dramatic area. It's really beautiful. I'd love to go back. So I set the orientation there for the top. I added some contrast, pulled down the shadows. I actually bumped up the highlights a little bit, and that's because I want to make sure that the white snow on the mountains stands out, and I'm going to show you how I do that in the next filter. In the bottom, bumped up the contrast, also increased the shadows a little bit, pulled down the highlights, and added some warmth. Again, just kind of balancing that out. So overall, Adjustable Gradient, I think it made a huge impact on the photo. There's the before, and there's the after. I definitely think it added a bit of drama. And here's where I was looking at the mountains, and I really wanted them to stand out. And then during my editing, I remember I was editing some photos with Serge Ramali while we were there. Serge is a great photographer, a great YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff, if you want to check him out. But he was using dodge and burn all the time. I mean, I think he lives and dies by dodge and burn. And I can see why. It's very powerful. So that was my next move. I just went in and started dodging and burning on the mountains. What I wanted to do is basically darken the dark areas, brighten the snow areas, and then add a little bit more darkness on the bottom. And if you look at the mountains, there you go. With the dodge and burn, I just create more drama. And really what you're doing, because you're lightening and darkening areas selectively, you're basically selectively applying contrast. That's the difference between the bright and the dark. And I think I added a nice pop to those mountains using dodge and burn. I think that was probably the most powerful edit I did in this entire photo. Let me show you again. There's before. Again, they look great, I think. I mean, they're fantastic. They just rise up and they're so powerful. but I think they were lacking a little bit. That dodge and burn, I think, gave them a little bit of oomph, which I think really made a difference in the photo. So here's where I was. I was pretty happy with the photo, and I should say that the first time I edited this, the very first thing I did was I got to put in a new sky, which you know is so easy and so awesome on the base layer with Luminar. But I got to this point, and I had not put in a new sky, and I was doing all these other edits. And you know, as you probably know, you're not going to replace the sky because it doesn't work on subsequent layers. It works on the base layer. So I kind of decided I wanted a new sky, so I said, you know what, I'm going to go figure it out. I'm going to put in a sky myself. So that's what this next layer was all about. I added a new sky, and I used the transform, and I used a luminosity mask to get it into the right areas. I don't necessarily recommend doing this unless you just want to have a painful 15, 20, 30-minute exercise versus 2 or 3 clicks with the tool that's already included, again, on the base layer. That works, but on layer 5 or whatever I'm on, all bets are off, so you got to do it manually. So I did it manually. It's not great. It's not bad, but what I did is I went and got a cloudy sky image. You know, I wasn't going to try to fake a sunset or anything like that. I just wanted to add something to the sky. So I went and got a cloudy sky image of my own that I have. I added it as a luminosity mask, and then I basically did some transform as well, where you just take this and squish it. And actually, you know what? That's actually not true. I came back and I pulled it back down because of how these clouds, that's right. Like I said, I failed so many times. I can't remember what I did, but I did transform it and move it way up. And then it just didn't really look that great with the clouds. I felt like they were in the wrong place. I felt like they were better this way. So I transformed it and then I untransformed it. The bottom line is I failed a lot. That's what I keep talking about. And you know, I just want to encourage you to experiment, and you're going to fail, and that's going to be okay. But I also added this as a luminosity mask because it's going to apply more heavily in the brighter parts of the photo, which of course are in the sky. Now, I didn't do a great job masking because I'm doing this by myself, and admittedly, at this point, I'd already spent a whole lot of time on it. So it kind of overlaps the top of the mountains a little bit, but I got to be honest, it kind of works, I think. If the clouds are slightly covering the top of the mountain, I don't look at that and say, Jim, terrible masking job. I just, number one, I don't notice if I didn't know that I put a new sky in. It just kind of would look like that, I think. But I wasn't done, so I put in the sky, and I was like, I like the sky, but I feel like I need to fix some things about it. So, new sky image added as a luminosity mask, and then I erased it from the bottom of the photo, which is the foreground and most of the mountains. But then I went into the light tool. I did some adjustments here, as you can see. I increased the contrast, I increased the exposure, I pulled down the highlights for the sky. Again, this layer is just the sky, so that's all I'm working on with every one of the tools here that I'm about to show you. After that was AI structure, and I went -72, just softening it up, just kind of blurring it out, just creating a softer, more gentle sky, almost as if it's kind of long exposure-y. Then I went to color, and here I just went into the blues, and I pulled down the saturation and the luminance. Again, I was a little worried about having too much blue in the photo, and I wanted to pull that back. And then I go into Details Enhancer, and here I just pulled, again, everything to the left, just softening up the details and creating that little bit softer look in the sky, similar to what I did with AI Structure. I'm just kind of doing it again, this time with negative details. And the last thing was I went over here to the Creative tab, and I got Glow, and I used Soft Focus Bright, and I gave it like a 43, and that just pops a little bit of those brighter tones, which I think looks kind of nice. And I just felt like it popped kind of nicely. So let me show you one more time. There's before and there's after. Again, just in the sky, but I think it gave it a nice little pop, and that's what I was looking for, to just give it a little bit more kick. Okay, so at this point I was pretty happy with the photo. There's spots that have been in the photo the whole time. So the next thing I did is I got the eraser. No, I didn't. Gosh. See, I've forgotten because I've done this so many times. I literally can't even remember it. I went and got another adjustment layer, and as you can see, I added some contrast. So I just went into the light tool, bumped up the contrast a little bit, and that was really just to create a little bit more of that excitement, for lack of a better word. I like contrasty images. Without the contrast, I feel like the image was a little bit flat. Let me show you the before. There it is. Just a little bit flatter, and the after, it just adds a little bit of oomph. The foreground gets a little bit darker, which I like. It is black sand. It's really cool there, by the way. The top gets a little bit lighter, again, drawing some of that contrast. And I also think it accentuates the mountains a little bit because of that pop of brightness in the sky and all that that's happening based on the previous edits, but also with this contrast. It's just creating more of a difference between dark and light, which is also popping, I think, the snow across the mountaintops. And then it was time to go do the eraser. And here there were some spots in the sky. There's one of the tour participants. Sorry, I don't know who that was, but I took them out and I pulled some spots out of down here. And so that's my final edit, my friends. That's what I started with, and that's what I ended with. And you know, I'm happy with it. I'm not in love with it, but I'm happy with it. It's been a ton of work, but it's been a lot of fun. And again, I feel like I've failed so many times editing this photo that at this point, I'm done with it for now. I'll probably come back to it, but my point really is don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try things. All of us question our edits. All of us do things and then don't quite do them right or don't know what things to do. I've been through, probably 5 to 7 edits of this photo, and I don't really know if I'm done. I mean, as I look at it, I'm like, I could maybe do a little bit more dodge and burn in the bottom half of those mountains, create a little bit more contrast there, but at some point also you just kind of got to step away from the ledge and stop editing and go take a break. It's good to come back with fresh eyes because then you'll have a new perspective, that sort of thing. But I just wanted to walk through a workflow and let you know that experimentation, failure, all those things can be beneficial and can help you propel yourself forward in your editing and where you may come up with something that you really like. I currently really like this. I may change my mind tomorrow, but we came a long way, my friends. There it is before. There it is now. I do appreciate you watching. I encourage you to go experiment, have fun with your videos, your photos. Thanks for watching this video. I appreciate that. And I'll see you really soon, my friends. Take care of yourselves out there. See you later and adios.